Welcome, dear listener. Tonight we drift back in time, not to a world of noise and haste, but to a place of shadows and candlelight, to a city of marble and dust, where empires rose and empires crumbled. This is the story of Drusilla, a woman born in obscurity, yet destined to shape the fate of an empire. Her journey will not be told as a tale of battlefields or conquests, but as one of whispers of patience and of quiet, enduring strength. So rest easy, let your breath slow, and allow history, softened into story, to carry you into calmness. The empire was vast, from the cold mountains in the north to the warm seas that shimmered beneath the southern sun. Its reach stretched farther than any kingdom before. And yet, it was fragile. Imagine standing on the steps of a grand forum. Marble columns rise like frozen trees. Statues of long-forgotten heroes gaze down. And the air carries the low murmur of merchants, soldiers, and citizens debating loudly in every corner. The empire had grown too quickly, and with its size came fractures. Civil wars smoldered like hidden embers. Old generals fought to hold onto glory. Young politicians schemed for influence. And ordinary people dreamed of peace that seemed always out of reach. It was in this unsettled world that Selina first opened her eyes. Drusilla was not born in a palace. She was not swaddled in silks, nor welcomed by trumpets and ceremony. Her family lived in a modest townhouse, at the edge of the bustling capital of Orion. The walls were plain, the floor uneven, and the scent of olive oil and clay lamps lingered in every room. Her father, a scribe, copied documents for the magistrates, a steady but unglamorous craft. Her mother, gentle and sharp-minded, taught her letters and the old stories of heroes and heroines who rose from nothing to greatness. Selina loved those stories. She would sit by the flickering fire, listening as her mother's voice spun tales of queens who guided kingdoms and of women whose patience bent history itself. Even as a child, Selina learned that power did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered. To grow up in Orion was to live between extremes. By day, the markets overflowed with color. Saffron and cinnamon from the east. Wool dyed deep crimson. Fish pulled fresh from the sea. By night, shadows stretched across narrow alleys. Torches flickered, and the air filled with murmurs of tavern songs, the clatter of dice, and arguments that sometimes ended in violence. Selina watched all of it. She observed the wealthy patricians in their flowing robes, and the beggars crouched at their feet. She noticed how one word from a senator could silence a crowd, and how a servant's small act of kindness could change the mood of an entire household. Even then, she began to understand a truth that would guide her all her life. Power does not belong only to those who shout the loudest. It also belongs to those who watch, who listen, and who wait. Childhood, however, was not without its sorrows. When Selina was still young, her father passed away unexpectedly. The house grew quieter, the walls colder. Her mother did what she could, teaching embroidery to wealthier households, scraping together enough to keep food on the table. But their world had narrowed. Selina felt the sting of exclusion. She saw other children with fine shoes and tutors, while she walked barefoot through the dust. Yet in that hardship, she grew sharper. She memorized everything she heard in the streets. Snippets of law, fragments of debate, songs sung by sailors that spoke of distant lands. The city became her teacher, and her ambition quietly began to form. As she grew into her teenage years, Selina's beauty became apparent. But it was not the shallow kind. Her gaze was steady, her words measured, her presence unshakable. Neighbors remarked that she carried herself like someone destined for more. Even when she wore plain linen, she walked as though she belonged among the marble columns of the Senate. It was around this time that Selina began to attract notice. Wealthier families invited her mother to teach embroidery, and Selina often accompanied her. She entered villas adorned with mosaics and fountains, and she listened, always listening, to the way men spoke when they thought servants could not hear, to the way alliances were hinted at with a raised eyebrow, to the way silence sometimes carried more weight than words. Though no one realized it, Selina was learning the art of survival and the greater art of influence. And so, in this city of contrasts, a girl without wealth, without title, and without power began the quiet climb toward destiny. She did not know it yet, but her path would carry her from these modest streets to the very heart of empire. The city of Orion could be generous, but it could also be merciless. Its streets remembered every whisper, its people repeated every rumor, and its leaders never forgot a slight. For Selina Drusilla, the next chapter of her life would not be lived among the fountains and mosaics. It would be spent in exile. Selina's mother had long feared it. Their family was too visible now. Selina's poise, her growing reputation for wit and quiet intelligence, drew attention from men of higher rank. And attention, in a city of politics, could be dangerous. One evening, a guest at a senator's banquet accused Selina's mother of overstepping her place. She had spoken too freely. They said, shared an opinion better left unsaid. It was a small spark. But in Orion, small sparks often lit large fires. Within weeks, her family was accused of dishonor. They were ordered to leave the capital. Selina, still barely a woman, saw the city she loved fade into the distance behind her as she and her mother traveled to a quiet coastal town. Exile was not a prison of walls, but it was a prison nonetheless. The town was simple: stone cottages, fishermen pulling nets before dawn, the cries of gulls carried on the wind. Selina and her mother lived in a modest home, with cracked plaster walls and a roof that leaked in storms. By day, Selina walked the shore. She learned to mend nets, to carry baskets of fish, to wash clothes in cold water until her hands were raw. By night, she listened again to her mother's stories. But now they felt different. No longer tales of distant heroes, but reminders of survival. Her world had narrowed, but her mind had not. She watched how fishermen bartered with one another, how the wives of sailors held influence in unseen ways, how even in a small town, alliances and rivalries shaped lives. Orion was far away, yet Selina was still studying for the day she would return. Years passed. Selina grew into her 20s. The girl who once lingered at the edges of banquets was now a woman of calm strength. Her voice was deeper, her gaze sharper, and her patience unshakable. But her spirit was restless. She longed for more than fishing boats and salt air. She longed for the marble columns, for the debates, for the theater of power that only Orion could offer. It was fate, or perhaps fortune, that finally gave her the chance to leave. One spring morning, word arrived. The decree of exile had been lifted. The politics of the empire had shifted once more. The Senate was distracted with rivalries, and those once accused were quietly forgotten. Selina and her mother packed what little they owned and made the long journey back. The city was as she remembered, bustling, noisy, brilliant, and cruel. But Selina was not the same. She returned not as a girl, but as a woman who had endured. She carried with her the lessons of exile. Patience, silence, observation. These would become her greatest weapons. It was during a public ceremony, in the great forum, that Selina first saw Octavianus Aurelius. He was not yet emperor, not yet the man whose name would echo through history. But already, he was gathering power. Tall, sharp-featured, his every gesture calculated. Octavianus was both admired and feared. He had risen through cunning, balancing mercy with ruthlessness, always one step ahead of rivals. Selina, standing among the crowd, watched him closely. She noticed not just the words he spoke, but the way he paused, the way he allowed silence to build weight, the way he let others believe they were in control, even as he guided them where he wished. In that moment, she recognized something in him, a reflection of herself. Their meeting was inevitable. Introductions were arranged through distant connections. Octavianus saw in Selina not just beauty, but a mind as disciplined as his own. Whispers spread quickly. He was a man of ambition. She a woman of questionable background. Their union was scandalous, unwelcome to many. Yet Octavianus was unmoved. He admired Selina's patience, her refusal to be rattled, her ability to see beyond the moment. Against all expectation, they married. The city gossiped. The Senate sneered. But Selina did not falter. She had entered the stage of empire, and she would not step off again. From exile by the sea to the arm of a rising statesman, Selina Drusilla had walked a path few would have dared. Her story was only beginning. The girl who once lived in shadows was now poised to shape the destiny of an empire. And the empire, though it did not know it yet, would never be the same. The wedding of Selina Drusilla and Octavianus Aurelius was not a grand affair by imperial standards. No golden arches, no endless parades. It was, in truth, a hurried union, arranged with quiet efficiency, and sealed with a handful of witnesses. But though the ceremony was modest, its consequences were vast. Selina was no longer an exile, no longer the daughter of a disgraced house. She was now the partner of a man whose ambition stretched beyond the horizon. And though many whispered that she was unworthy of such a role, Selina herself did not whisper at all. She simply began to listen, to watch, to weave her presence into the fabric of his life. Octavianus was a man of words. He spoke in the Senate, on the battlefield, in the courts of law. Selina, by contrast, wielded silence as her weapon. In council, she did not interrupt. She did not argue loudly. Instead, she would raise a brow, or tilt her head, and with a single glance, she guided the course of conversation. Octavianus learned quickly that her silences were never empty. They were full of meaning, warnings, insights, predictions. He began to rely on her counsel, sometimes more than on his generals, sometimes more than on his oldest allies. And soon, others in Orion realized that the path to Octavianus's favor often ran quietly through the chamber of his wife. Orion itself was changing. The wars of succession had torn the land apart, but Octavianus was piecing it back together. Temples were rebuilt, laws rewritten, taxes reorganized. The empire, which had once seemed a crumbling republic, now stood taller, reborn in marble and gold. But building an empire required more than stone and coin. It required trust. It required the appearance of stability. And here, Selina's presence became invaluable. At feasts, she welcomed rival families with warmth that disarmed old grudges. In ceremonies, her calm dignity reassured citizens that their emperor was not a tyrant, but a man guided by harmony. She became the face of peace, while Octavianus remained the hand of power. Selina cultivated influence, the way a gardener tends flowers. She wrote letters to governors in the provinces, offering gentle advice, soft reminders, or words of comfort in times of hardship. She welcomed senators' wives to her villa, where politics could be discussed in whispers, over cups of spiced wine. And she never forgot a name, never forgot a child's birthday, a family's tragedy, a favor owed. This web of quiet connections grew year by year, until it spanned the empire itself. While Octavianus commanded armies, Selina commanded loyalty, one built with legions, the other with memory. Yet the empire was never safe. Rivals plotted in the shadows. Old bloodlines longed to reclaim influence. Ambitious generals measured their loyalty against the weight of their own desires. It was during these dangerous years that Selina's instincts proved vital. She noticed patterns in reports from the provinces, small inconsistencies in letters, expressions of discontent, hidden in polite phrases. Her warning saved Octavianus more than once. A governor who might have turned traitor was dismissed quietly. A general's ambitions were curbed before they could swell into open rebellion. And always, her advice was offered with composure, never in anger, never in fear, simply as truth, unshaken, unwavering. But even within their household, danger brewed. Octavianus had children from his first marriage, each one a potential heir to his throne. Their lives became entangled with questions of succession, of legacy, of who would guide the empire after him. Selina, who had sons of her own, understood the stakes. Every banquet, every marriage, every friendship could alter the balance of the future. And though she never raised her voice, she shaped the course of these decisions. Some alliances were encouraged, others dissolved quietly. One heir fell ill under suspicious circumstances. Another met misfortune abroad. No accusation was ever proven, but the whispers never ceased. The city began to call her by a new name, the Serpent Empress. Despite the murmurs, her influence only grew. By the time Octavianus took the title of Augustus, the empire no longer doubted that Selina was more than a consort. She was his partner, his confidant, his mirror. Together, they balanced the scales of rule, force and restraint, ambition and patience, iron and silk. When foreign emissaries came to Orion, they spoke not only with the emperor, but with the empress, and many returned home believing that she, not he, was the truest mind behind the throne. From a girl in the shadows of banquets, to an exile by the sea, to the quiet power behind the first emperor, Selina Drusilla had transformed her fate. Yet her story was not finished. The empire she helped to shape would face storms ahead, succession struggles, betrayals, and the final test of her patience. And in those storms, the calm, calculating voice of Selena would echo louder than ever. The empire had been rebuilt. Its temples stood gleaming, its armies disciplined, its people largely at peace. But peace brought its own unease. For every empire must face one question: who will inherit the throne? Augustus had no sons by Selena, only his daughter from his first marriage, and her children, the bright young heirs of the Julian line. The city adored them. The Senate praised them. They were blood of Julius himself. But Selena knew blood alone could not hold power. She had sons of her own, children of her first marriage, boys who had grown into men, tested by command and discipline. She dreamed not of her own crown, but of a legacy, a dynasty where her sons would guide the empire's future. It was a dangerous dream, and to many it seemed impossible. But Selena had never accepted impossibility. One by one, the Julian heirs fell. A fever claimed one boy in the provinces. Another died from wounds in battle that many whispered were not as accidental as the reports claimed. Each death drew the empire into mourning. Each funeral filled the streets with tears. And at each funeral, Selena stood calm, her black veil drawn, her composure unbroken. The people whispered. The senators whispered. Was it misfortune? Or was it design? History has never answered. But when the ashes of the last Julian heir were placed in the mausoleum, there was no denying the truth. Selena's sons now stood closest to the throne. Her enemies began to call her the Serpent, not for treachery, but for her patience, for her ability to lie still, silent, waiting for the right moment to strike. Unlike generals who spilled blood on battlefields, Selena's victories left no visible wounds, only empty chairs at banquets, unanswered letters, and the gradual shifting of power from one house to another. She never confessed. She never explained. And so the legend of the Serpent Empress grew larger than any truth. Through all of this, Augustus remained at her side. He grew older. His body weakened, but his trust in Selena never faltered. When illness confined him, she carried his words to the Senate. When grief clouded him, she offered clarity. When doubt consumed him, she reminded him of what they had built together. For 40 years, their partnership endured. History would remember Augustus as the first emperor. But those who lived in his age knew he was never alone. Selena's hand was always there, steady, unseen, indispensable. When Augustus died, the empire held its breath. Would chaos return? Would rival families rise again? Would the dream of stability collapse? But no chaos came. No armies marched. No senators rebelled. Selena had prepared too carefully. Her elder son, Tiberian, stepped forward as heir. The legions obeyed him. The Senate confirmed him. The empire bowed. For the first time in its history, a transfer of supreme power was peaceful. The Serpent Empress had ensured it. Selena lived on, outlasting her husband, watching her son rule. She did not retire quietly. Her villa remained a court of whispers, her correspondence a lifeline of politics. Ambassadors still sought her audience, and her advice still shaped decisions that bore her son's name. Even in age, her mind was sharp, her patience endless. She walked the gardens of her estate with the same calm steps she had once taken through the markets as a girl. To some she was a hero, to others a shadow, to all she was unforgettable. When at last she died, the empire mourned with ceremony, but also with unease. For many asked themselves, had she been the savior of Orion, or had she been its hidden ruler, guiding destiny with a serpent's grace? The answer, perhaps, was both. Selena Drusilla's story did not end with her death. Her legacy lived on in the dynasty she shaped, in the empire she steadied, and in the lessons whispered by history itself. That power does not always roar. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it listens. Sometimes it moves with silence sharper than any sword. Tonight, as you lie in the stillness of your own world, remember Selena's story. The girl who grew up in shadows, the woman who endured exile, the empress who outweighted rivals, the serpent whose patience carved an empire. Her name may not echo as loudly as Augustus. Her statues may not stand in every forum, but her influence, quiet, enduring, unseen, remains one of history's greatest truths. And now, her whisper has reached you, carried across centuries, across empires, to this very moment of stillness. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the lesson of her life settle softly in your mind. Power is not always taken by the sword. Sometimes it is won by silence, by patience, by the serpent's coil, waiting for the right time. Good night.